Wow, it's the Empire State Building.
People are talking about how the Trump tariff taxes are going to like fuck us up because there's like no infrastructure in the United States that's actually going to like fill the void of all the goods that we're importing. Me, being the politically illiterate person I am, read something like that and I'm like, wow, this reminds me of that time I tried to do an internet detox and it didn't work. And I'm drawing, by the way. That's what's happening on screen. Every now and then, I'll like try to get off Discord. I already don't really use social media, but this idea I recurringly have is just to like cut out the things that I rely on too much, and then I'll be forced to fill it with something by necessity. You know, it's almost like the apocalyptic approach. Like if an EMP hit the planet and there was no more internet, which would suck because that's where I live. I live on the internet. I'm a little algorithm that generates malware on your computer. But if that happened, then I'd be like, oh damn, I have to like actually like go out of the house and like talk to my neighbors now. Or like go on the bus and be like, wow, humans. There were times where I would just like pretend like that's what was happening. I'd just be like, okay, no more internet for me. No more Discord for me. No more YouTube for me. And doing stuff like that is like, it's still cool. Like I still like doing that. It gives my brain space to breathe. Just going off the internet entirely. I feel like I'm among that like culture and generation of people who grew up who were just like very heavily reliant on the internet. And so when I go away from it, it's like, I'm not just taking away like a bad habit or something. Like I'm actually removing a lot of where I receive like my social battery from. Wait, how do I explain this? Like I talk to people at work, but like that on its own like doesn't feel like it would be substantial enough. Or at least if the internet disappeared, I would very quickly be like, oh damn, I feel really isolated. It would maybe work if during those like internet detox I was like, okay, cool, now that the internet is gone, I'm going to text some friends and like make some plans and do some stuff. But every time I do a detox, it's just like, okay, I'm going to get rid of this thing. And then I have like nothing to fill that void with. You know, I haven't created something that's going to provide value in space of the value that I took away. Taking away something and then creating a necessity for something else, it's still going to feel harder for me to like reach out to a random person than it's gonna feel to take the brunt of it and like wait out the time staring at a wall or watching a Netflix show or whatever it is. Like I need to have the system set up in advance in order to do something like that for my mental health. Kind of like creating a tariff without having infrastructure in your country. Whoa, you see how this is actually connected? I swear I'm not just rambling. I think I kind of romanticized the idea of growing up in a locationless location, you know? That is to say, like in a digital space, feeling like you're more connected to an online space than any place in the real world. Like several years ago, I moved away from the place that I grew up in. And, you know, people would be like, oh, do you miss that place? That seems like a very different place to grow up. And I'm like, no, not really. It's just another place, you know? It's just like the circumstance in which my living body existed. But if you ask me a question like, oh, you stopped using twitch.tv? What's YouTube streaming like? I'd be like, it's so different. It hurts my brain. I'm really having a rough time getting this little line here. I just want that perfect line. You know, it's like I claim an ownership like over like the digital domain as though it were a place I grew up in. And it's a very broad place. It's like saying I grew up on Earth, the non-physical Earth, you know, the Earth that humans invented within the electric box. You know, if something bad happens to me, I'm like, how lucky am I to have this like specific negative experience? Now I know what it feels like. I still find myself falling into that little habit of like seeing it as a good thing, low key. In a way it is, because like I learned good things from it. And then sometimes I'll make art about those moments. I'll like draw those moments again, or I'll like recontextualize it. I'll draw it in a way where every character looks like this. And it's like, you know, you have a way of viewing the world with more sympathy when when every person in the story is just a little guy, you know? It makes it easier for me to empathize with not just the people who I experienced that with, but also like for myself. Like I didn't intrinsically have that empathy for myself. So being able to project yourself into characters is a little bit of a of a help. I don't rely solely on that anymore, but it definitely helped. I feel like that's partly why I romanticize a lot of stuff. I may even have a bad habit of like romanticizing like a terminally online sort of lifestyle. And I feel like if you can't find happiness in your current circumstance, then it's never gonna feel that way. You know, money in a very literal way buys you access to freedom, but if your lifestyle is just to like supplement your happiness by buying things, like that's not gonna do it for you. It's gonna feel worse in the long run. I want to understand for myself that there's no like missed opportunity. The alternative to thinking that way would be thinking, oh no, I'm doomed because of this thing about my past. You know, I don't want to think that way. I don't want to think that there's no hope because of something that I can no longer control. You know, I try to see the things that some people would see as negative as like cool and character building, you know, something that informed where I'm at right now. Also simultaneously employing the nuance that eventually you may be in a point in your life where that advice doesn't help you, where thinking that way makes you complacent. But at least for me, this is something I need to like get me moving out of a rut. And so in that same vein, it's not hard for me to see how my dependency on the internet actually gives me a great deal of social connection. You know, like I get a lot of value out of that. But if I get rid of this cold turkey, that doesn't solve the problem either. So what is it I'm actually trying to solve with this? That's the question I give to myself as homework. And to anybody who's in a similar position. You may start by taking drastic life changes just to see if that's the right answer for you, or even if there's like a part of it that's right, but the whole thing feels a little off. But if there's just a little thread of something in there that seems right, like, you know, you might stop using the internet entirely for like 2 weeks and then be like, okay, that's cool, but also I need to pay taxes. And it's like, how am I going to do that without the internet? I have a real loving relationship with the internet, a real loving Stockholm situation with the internet. It feels more familiar to me than most places in the real world I've existed, you know? But I know there was this thing I was talking about earlier about like representing yourself through characters as a way of like imbuing yourself with empathy. And I've been trying to do that also just for grounding myself in a reality outside of the internet. I've been drawing a lot more art that represents like the actual place I am now and the type of activities that I do now in the real world. And it's interesting because, you know, I feel like for normal people, you would just like go outside and do an activity and be like, oh, that was fun. That was fun on its own merits. For me, even though it is still fun on its own merits, I'll sometimes like go out and I'll like go skateboarding is something I started trying to pick up recently. If I know that after doing that, I'll like have new experiences to inspire my drawing, like that makes it more fun to go outside and do it. Because there's this idea of when writing stories to write what you know. So I'm genuinely interested in getting to know how to do these certain things so that I can like portray them in this fictional space that feels really real and affirming to me. Sorry, I like stories. I'm very fiction pilled. Fiction feels more immediately emotionally present than things that are literally immediately in front of me. So I'm just trying to help them work in tandem, you know, make art that supports reality so that reality feels more real. Yeah? We're on a real disassociative type beat with that one. I love how this black cat has just been zooming around in the background, collecting scraps this whole time. But yeah, that's just what was on my mind while drawing this. New videos coming never, because I don't have enough motivation